Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the device regulatory session of our regulatory compliance and quality, or RCQ, track. My name is Paul Brooks. I was the Executive Director of RAPS, the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, and I'll be your host for this session this afternoon. I hope many of you out there are members of RAPS and are aware of the local RAPS Utah chapter. We have two very salient presentations in the session this afternoon: Brexit over the pond and managing global requirements in medical device development. We'll get started with the Brexit presentation in just a moment. Before I do, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, BioHive Diagnostics. Thank you very much for your sponsorship and support. So to the Brexit session, I'm delighted to introduce our first presenter, Tim Lee. Tim's going to talk about what Brexit means for device regulation. Tim has been with BSI for over 6 years, helping medical device companies understand and meet global medical device requirements. He's had significant training in CE marking, regulations, and international requirements, and he's worked for a number of major manufacturers, including Kimberly-Clark, Coca-Cola, and Thermo Fisher. Please join me in giving Tim a very warm welcome this afternoon. Thanks, Tim.
Hey, thank you, Paul. All right. Thanks again, Paul. Thanks, BioUtah, for having BSI and me speak today on UKCA. We have quite a few number of slides here with not too much time, so we will breeze through them fairly quickly, but the majority of the slides are pretty straightforward, so I don't think we need to spend too much time on each one. So we will get started. The agenda today will have just a quick recap on the legislation, talk about labeling, we'll talk about BSI specific conformity assessment models to achieve UKCA, any lessons learned from the process so far, and we'll touch on the future legislation with the MHRA consultation. As always, the slides and information presented are based off the latest knowledge that we have based off the current legislation and the information available. So this is all subject to change. It most likely will change, so just a precursor to that. So we'll get started. So to place a device into the UK market, whether it's Northern Ireland or the Great Britain market, a couple of different pathways to go. We'll first discuss the Northern Ireland market. So for Northern Ireland, they are following the legislation, the European legislation, meaning for any conformity assessments, you must follow the European laws, which are the medical device directives or the medical device regulations. From there, you would have a European Declaration of Conformity, affix the CE mark, must apply with the MHRA, and then you will be able to place your products into the Northern Ireland markets. To the right in the red, we'll talk about the Great Britain market. Two different pathways as of now, date dependent. The first one, you can again follow the European legislation, so the directives or regulations. Just like Northern Ireland, you have a European Declaration of Conformity. You'll affix the CE mark and you'll register the device with the MHRA. Or you can follow the UK legislation, which is optional now. It will be mandatory from July 1st, 2023. But in that pathway, you will have you must follow the UK legislation, which is today is UK MDR 2002. From there, you'll have a UKCA Declaration of Conformity. You'll affix the UKCA mark with the UK approved body number. If you are a manufacturer outside the UK, you must also identify your UK responsible person on the labeling or IFU, and we'll touch on that later. And then just like the other two, you must register the device with the MHRA. as the last slide has shown, the registration of devices, no matter which pathway you choose, you must register with the MHRA. This slide is mostly telling you about the timelines. It's a table of grace periods of when you must comply to register with the MHRA. As you can tell for the table, most of them have already passed. So there's actually only one more grace period left, which is the Class 1 medical devices. I think the key takeaway here, though, irrespective of whether you're in the UK market with the UKCA mark or the CE pathway, you must register the MHRA and you must have a UKRP or UK responsible person. The UKRP stands for the UK responsible person. A lot of information on this slide, but I think the key takeaways here are it's very similar to the EU rep in terms of the duties and the directives. The screen grab to the right here is the duties of the EU rep under the directives. Common misconceptions: it is not the same person as the person responsible for regulatory compliance or the PRRC. The UKRP is someone completely separate. The other key takeaway here is BSI is interpreted as soon as possible, where manufacturers must have a UKRP appointed as soon as possible. And to our interpretation, that actually means 11 months ago, which is January 1st, 2021. So if you don't have a UKRP, I would definitely recommend getting one as soon as possible. You're only allowed one per legal manufacturer. So again, that's very different from the PRRC. A couple more key takeaways here. As you can see, it can be a distributor or importer, but it's not mandatory. For labeling purposes, the symbol for the UKRP has not been established yet. General labeling principles for the Great Britain market. So we're going to talk about those two pathways again that we talked about earlier. This one is with the European legislation. So if you are placing products into the Great Britain market with the CE mark, we do not expect to use UKCA because you're not following UK legislations. You are still following the European legislation. So the UKCE mark is not to be used. Although you are required to have a UKRP, you are not required to identify that person on the labeling. So if you follow the European directives or regulation, still must have a UKRP, but it does not have to be identified. Still have to register at the MHRA, and you're not supposed to use the UKCA mark. Now, on the contrary, if you do place products into the Great Britain market with the UK legislation, you are expected to use the UKCA mark with the UK approved body number. Again, if you're outside the UK, which I assume most, if everyone on this call is, you must identify the UKRP on the labels or IFU. And just like I said before, you would have the UKCA Declaration of Conformity, and you must register with the MHRA. Statutory instrument number 873 here. So this is an amendment to EU laws today. Basically, though, it means it's moving European laws to make them more UK centric or UK specific. The key takeaway here is there's actually no change in the actual requirements of these laws. The key takeaway is that in your documentation, you do want to reference and call out the correct UK legislation in all documentation. So although none of the laws have actually changed in content, this amendment is making it more UK centric, for example. So the next few slides will be talking about the BSI Conformity Assessment model. So a couple of examples. This first one is a new application with no prior certification with BSI or anybody. The process flow goes, if you've worked with BSI before or any other notified body, you would ask for a quotation or application to whatever you're applying. So in this case, for a new UKCA, you'll go through the quotation pre-application activities with someone like myself, or if you're working at BSI, go through the application review. In the conformity assessment step in the middle, we'll have some, just like for CE marking, we'll have a QMS assessment, technical assessments for technical files or technical documentation. Once it goes through those audits, it goes to the final review and decision making, which are internal to BSI or the panel review, and then certificates will be issued. Under this pathway, because this is the UK pathway, we do expect to see the UK specific requirements being called out in documentation. So there should be no reference to the MDD. There should be no reference to harmonized standards. It should be all reference to the UK. Other key takeaways here, any device drug combinations or animal tissue derivatives with TSE risk susceptible animal species, those might need additional consultation from the MHRA. They have said they'll take acceptable reports from the EU, but most likely they will probably do another review on those types of products as well. This next scenario are UKCA applications. If you do hold certificates from BSI Netherlands or 2797, what we call an abridged conformity assessment. So the first three steps are very similar, if not the same, where you ask for a quotation and go through the application process. The abridged part is where in that conformity assessment, we try to leverage existing work done in the past. So meaning we'll have minimal QMS audits, if any, depending on the scope of the certificate. And we'll look at if there's any compliance issues, meaning if there are any major nonconformities, or if your MDD certificate has any gaps in it. Probably shouldn't. So this is a fairly simple process to move over from MDD or MDR certificates to UKCA from a BSI perspective. This scenario is if you're not lucky enough to be with BSI and you're with another notified body and you want to apply for UKCA. As of right now, I believe there's only 3 approved UK approved bodies out there. So I know other notified bodies have applied, but I'm not sure of their status, where they are in the application. But if you are with another notified body and you are interested in, saying, applying for UKCA with BSI, the process flow for the conformity assessment, it's fair to say it's similar to a transfer of a CE certificate in the past, although it's not a true transfer, as we're not working with MDD anymore. Let's say you have an MDR certificate, you're obviously not transferring the MDR to us. We're just taking that scope of work and we're applying for a UKCA certificate. So what happens in that process flow, we do a pre-transfer technical documentation review, really high-level technical assessment to make sure it's quality for us, a QMS transfer assessment, which is usually a one-day audit. And then depending on the number of devices and the device categories in the scope, it will depend on how much technical documentation we have to review. Again, as I mentioned before, the other things to keep in mind are device drug combinations and animal tissue derivatives with TSE risk. Those consultations may have to be repeated. This next pathway are the combined applications. So you're a brand new client and you want to apply for both UKCA and MDR or IVDR at the same time. We try to leverage as much as we can. So we'll have combined QMS audits, combined microbiology audits if there's sterility involved. In terms of technical documentation, again, we try to combine as much as we can. Unfortunately, because it is two different legislations and two different laws, we add just a little incremental time to the UKCA reviews. The MDR reviews will take up the chunk of the time, and then the little additional half days are added just for the UKCA portion. I'm not sure if there are any IVD companies here. I think there is an IVD session going on. So the key takeaway here, though, is if you are an IVD company, we cannot leverage that combined technical documentation review because of the gap from IVDD to IVDR is so significantly different in terms of risk classification, in terms of how it's structured. So that combined review is not possible. Those would be two completely standalone reviews. But in terms of medical devices, we can definitely leverage as much as we can for a combined assessment, both on the QMS side and on the MDR side. Lessons learned so far from all the applications we've seen. Declarations and conformities, they must be separate. So if you are applying for, if you want products in the UK, we expect a UK-centric declaration of conformity, not referencing any of the directives, any European legislations. Although it's fair to say UK MDR 2002 is very similar to the directives today, there should be no mentions of the European legislations at all. So that has to be completely separate. Labeling misconceptions, like I talked about earlier, some manufacturers taking advantage of the CE marking pathway. They think they can just apply the UKCA symbol. If you're applying through the European legislations, you just keep the CE mark. You have not done the UK conformity assessment, so you're not allowed to use the UKCA mark. You must have a UK RP assigned ASAP, like I mentioned. And then with technical and QMS documentation, again, and it goes back to that slide I talked about making things more UK-centric. You must reference all the UK legislative requirements. Big example for EU and MDR, you would reference the GSPRs, the mineral safety performance requirements, and for for UKCA, you would mention the essential requirements of the MDD. Process, like I talked about earlier, is fairly straightforward, fairly simple. So do not delay. We'll breeze through this really quick. I think I only have 10 minutes left. The key takeaway for the consultation, it is open today. Basically, the MMDA is the Medicines and Medical Devices Act, basically meaning it is a framework to replace or amend the current laws today, which is the MDR 2002. This enables the government to change it or amend the law, which is what we're in the process of the consultation. So everything moving forward from here is just speculation. It's not law yet. It's nothing official. It's what they've proposed, and they've actually left it open for public comment until November 25th. So if you are interested, they would welcome your feedback and comments to this consultation. But and this is where this is the goals of the new consultation and what they're trying to achieve with the new law for the UK. As mentioned, it's open until the 25th of November for public comment. Couple key highlights of the consultation, excuse me. It is mostly aligned with the MDR and IVDR. There are some specific UK sections that are quite interesting. I'll touch on them fairly quickly here. First one is Chapter 10, it's called software as a medical device. A lot of it actually has incorporating artificial intelligence though. So if you are a manufacturer with active devices with software incorporated, or if you are just a standalone software as a medical device company, this is something you definitely want to look into and maybe provide some feedback to the MHRA for this consultation. The key takeaways here, a couple interesting parts. It's always been a question about whether software and websites being placed into the market and what that means. This calls out that if it's accessible or downloadable, or you can download the app on the App Store, you can go to the website. In the UK, that means you are placing that product in the UK market. So that's specifically called out. Another one specifically for artificial intelligence, there's talks of using IVDR type performance evaluation, even though your product may not necessarily be an in vitro diagnostic or have any in vitro diagnostic purposes. That is specifically calling out no false positives or negatives. So there could be some requirements from the IVDR that could be blended in for medical devices as well. Chapter 11 talking about implantable devices. This is fairly similar to the MDR. It was created based off the past failed products, for example, like surgical meshes. Basic gist, increased scrutiny, increased clinical evidence for implantable devices. The really interesting one here, I would say, is the controlled access to implantable devices. So the consultation has suggested that maybe only specific experts or technical experts may use the implantable devices in certain settings. So that is very interesting to hear. Routes to market, 3 of them are specifically called out in the consultation. One of them is kind of referenced, but really quickly, the MDSAP method, which is the Medical Device Single Audit Program, as it is today for QMS access, or I'm sorry, QMS approval, I guess you could say, for the US, FDA, Health Canada, and Visa Brazil, TGA Australia, and PMDA Japan. One of the proposed routes is having an MDSAP certificate, using those outputs for success from the QMS side, and then having a technical documentation review done by a UK approved body for access to the UK market. Domestic assurance is using MHRA approved approved jurisdictions. So if you have a successful product that's been placed on the market through a different country, and the MHRA recognizes that country's approval, you can use that for an abridged assessment to get market into the UKCA. The CE and UKCA is not directly in the consultation, but is referenced in a way where under the domestic assurance, it specifically called out CE marking may not be the best, or it calls out that CE may not be like a domestic assurance pathway, meaning a certification assessment body such as BSI could help you get market access to both EU and the UK under the same type of review, because they leverage, like I said, MDR and UKCA are so, well, the consultation and MDR are so closely aligned. The final pathway is UKCA, just following the UK, whatever the new consultation, new law is after it is published. Let's see here. This one I'll just touch on really quick. It's interesting because it's maybe a response to the criticism that MDR has on innovative devices. This chapter calls out what I guess the FDA would call breakthrough devices. So any devices that could be game changers, or aren't as popular because they affect a small number of population, something that does not get beloved, I guess. You could apply through a pre-market assessment and try to get into the market sooner. So that is a proposal that's interesting and very different from the MDR. And then lastly, the transitional agreements in terms of timelines. This is synonymous to probably Article 120 in the MDR. Basic gist of this is if you are in the UK market with a CE mark, it's very unclear what happens after July 1st. Right now, the consultation says you can remain on the market with a light touch assessment. We don't know what light touch means. And it does not specify or clarify if it means you can bring in new product after July 1st. So remain in the market does not necessarily mean you can bring in new products. So basic gist of this slide is having a UKCA certificate now has much more benefits than just going through the UK market with a CE mark. Again, I would say though, this is all consultation. That's all speculative. It's not law. It's not written law. So these are all just suggestions right now. The timeline of this consultation, we're in that pretty much that first dot right now. Again, it ends on November 25th. The goal of it is to be finalized by mid-22 and then actually published hopefully by the summer of 2022. So we have a year of implementation from July 1st, 2023. And Paul, I think that's it.
Great, thanks, Tim. I think we've got about 2 minutes left for a couple of questions. Let me start with something here. In terms of UKCA certificates, you know, have many been issued yet?
Yeah, for sure. We've issued quite a few actually. Like I said, the pathway from at least existing clients for BSI, it's a fairly straightforward process. If you had existing MDD or MDR certificates, we leverage work done in the past already to get you that UKCA certificate. So we've issued quite a few. And
I know, you know, how long's a piece of string, but if somebody makes a good submission, you know, what's your expectation in terms of what the clearance time might be with BSI?
Yeah, the process is fairly straightforward. As you can tell, the number of requirements from UKCA today from MDR is not a significant gap. So the reviews are done fairly quickly. The trouble is the reviewers, the same reviewers doing UKCA are doing the same reviews for EU MDR. So I would stress to the manufacturers that although it's a simple process, resources are still constrained because it's the same people doing MDR work as well. So it can be a quick process, but it's also the same people doing MDR.
So I think the guidance there to manufacturers would be, if you need UKCA clearance, don't wait until you need it, because as this gets busy, there could be more constraints on the capacity, Tim.
100%.
And we're pretty much out of time. I just want to emphasize to everybody, Tim spent quite a bit of time talking about the proposed changes to the UK requirements. MHRA is really good at listening to industry when they go through this process, but they can't listen to industry if you don't give them feedback. So I would encourage everybody that's interested in the UK market to review the MHRA proposals and give them feedback. And I suspect you might want to give them feedback to stay aligned as much as possible with requirements elsewhere that we all have to meet. Tim, thank you very much. And thanks for everybody watching in. You shared a lot of important information there. I enjoyed your remarks, and I hope everybody else did as well.
Thank you, Paul.
So maybe now we can move on to the next session of this next half an hour of this session, at least. And we're going to be seeing a presentation on managing global requirements in medical device development. And for this session, we've got two distinguished panelists who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves in a second. Firstly, we have Susumu Nozawa, Head of Regulatory Policy, Siemens Healthineers, I can always stumble over that. and also Peter Takes, Principal at Regulatory Intelligence Associates. Susumu, can you introduce yourself first?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Susumu Nozawa. I'm a head of the regulatory policy for North America. I cover US, Canada, and also all IMDRF countries. So it's pretty much global. I have been in the medical device sector for many years. So I have done many things, many submissions around the globe, and then I'm now focusing on the North American market.
It's a small community, Susumu. We all seem to know each other and move on the same orbit.
Yeah, that's true.
Peter, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Peter Takes. As Paul said, I'm principal with Regulatory Intelligence Associates. I also serve in a very active academic role where I direct the master's program in science management and leadership at Webster University, along with a couple other academic appointments. Like Susumu, I'm board certified in regulatory affairs and a RAPS fellow. I have been in the corporate world for a long time, serving various executive and scientific positions in research, regulatory affairs, and compliance with companies like Sigma Aldrich Corporation. And I'm currently lead medical device section editor for RAPS.
It's difficult to imagine two more experienced panelists, actually. Both of you guys, Susumu and Peter, I know well, and have got great reputations and have contributed to RAPS publications. Can I now ask each of you to share your thoughts on how to manage the global regulatory landscape?
Sure. Let me start off. Start with a little talk about what's going on in the healthcare sector to set the stage for Peter later on.
Susumu, are you going to share our slides?
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I'm sharing.
We see them.
Okay. All right. Let me switch. Okay, is it better?
That's great.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, let me talk about what's going on in the healthcare sector at the high level first. Then we can dig into how to manage those changes. So as you know, healthcare sector landscape is changing dramatically in recent years. New technology coming in every day, every second, basically. That pushes, those push the regulators on how to regulate those new technologies. Some regulator may choose to update, existing regulatory framework, or creating new regulatory pathway. And also, technological change and the pushes the payers. They are under very radical transformation, and then they have to change many things. And then they now focusing on controlling cost of care, and also being more efficient, and also delivering improved patient care for their business. So it's really a big change. And also stakeholders like a clinic, hospital and a clinic, and also mindset is changing. They seems to willing to pay for medical device, which is tied to impact their patient outcomes and also performance metrics for their operation. So those, I would call those three a perfect storm. We need to think about how to navigate through those perfect storms. So, regulatory strategy certainly play a key role in that navigation process. So what we need to do? So we really need to think about how to develop a product, not really physical development, but from concept to the commercialization, that's really we need to think about. And the regulatory affairs professional tend to join those work very late, but we cannot do that anymore. We need to have much earlier involvement in the process. So, product development process, we call it PDP. Not only focus on the product, but we need to focus on customer adoption of the product as the goal, because we need to sell, and then we need to improve the healthcare. So we need to understand and also demonstrate. I put the underscore there, how their product, improve the patient outcomes, and also efficiency and value at the stakeholders. So we tend to think about we are regulatory, we do submission and the regulatory compliance, and then the marketing functions sell the product. To think about the strategy to sell the product, and then those siloed, thinking no longer work. We need to work together as a collaborative in the process, as a cross-functional markets team. So that really mindset we need to go into. So global market analysis, that's a very important activity that we need to do. In the past, we just do competitive landscape analysis, size of the market, and also very focused approach on product features. But as I mentioned previously, we need to have a much robust market assessment of the patient and customer adoption as the goal. So number one, most important thing to me is that identifying the patient unmet clinical need, which our product will address. Without thinking about this, we're not going to be able to sell our product. And also clinical economic evidence and determine that how successful our product launch is. And then unmet need. This is a really critical first step. We need to start. And potential size of the market, and then disease state we want to address, and also current other product offering by our company or competitors, or even not in the healthcare sector, in the other sector as well. As we're moving into more software approach and AI, ML, those new technology tend to blur the borderline between the product sector. So that's another consideration we need to think about. And then market size and then competitive analysis is a very important important exercise that we need to do well. Basically, we need to identify how much market is existed, and within that market, how much share we want to try to grab. So by doing so, we will get a much clearer picture on what the customer is looking for, and then how many customers we expect, and also which customer we can target, and then who is in the space as a competitor. So those analysis really put heavy impact on what we do in the regulatory, and also impact the design and the future, and also commercial claims. And then reimbursement is, of course, very important. We need to have evidence, and also we need to have the customer we want to sell our product. to the customers. So those are very important. And then it's really, key message here from my side is we need to have, cross-functional team to address all of those well and early enough to moving forward. So that perfect storm environment we are in now. So we need to do a lot in the regulatory space as well. So I end my portion here, and then I will pass it on to Peter.
Thanks, Susumu. And just as you can see already, just like Tim said with his presentation, we have a lot on these slides, a lot of additional information that unfortunately we don't have time to talk about because we're in a limited amount of time here. But hopefully you'll be able to absorb a lot from that. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on regulatory strategy and globally what the commonality is. And one of the things Susumu mentioned was when do we engage? And that's probably one of the most common question I get, particularly from new regulatory professionals or young startup companies. When do we have regulatory engagement in our product development process? And the children's story Alice in Wonderland kind of summed it up really the best. You begin at the beginning, and then you go on to the end, and then you stop. And that's really what I tell people. As Susumu said, we start at least when patient clinical needs are being acquired, but certainly as you get to the point in your development phase or your research phase where you say, okay, I think we have a product here, that's when we as regulatory professionals need to get engaged and start to think about the regulatory strategy. And then we stay at the forefront of this through the entire product life cycle. Regulatory strategies are neither stagnant nor static. They're developing, they're evolving with the product even after it's on the market. So you have to stay on top of current trends in technology, expertise, but particularly in regulatory review. Globally, there's changing requirements of clinicians, patients, and regulators. And regulators are evolving their knowledge of a new product area, and that's going to change the focus and the efficiency of their regulation. So your job is really to do your homework. Know what products came before you and in that similar to your product, and what products are being engaged by the regulatory agencies right now while you're getting your product engaged. And don't get stuck in regulatory printed regulatory timelines. 510Ks take 90 days and PMAs take 180 days. That's a trap that can get you into trouble. Next slide, Susumu. So this is just something I pulled out of a recent article in JAMA. August 3rd, 2021 was published, where it looked at medical devices through the history since the medical device regulations in 1976 up through last year. But what the main point, and I could spend an hour just talking about this graph, but the main point that I want to make here in the limited time that we have is that as I said, don't get trapped into regulatory timelines. You tell your executive management, okay, we got a 510K, and 510Ks take 90 days, or we just submitted a PMA, and PMAs take 180 days. And the first thing you're going to hear from management is, okay, in 90 days we're ready for product launch, or in 180 days we're ready for product launch. Don't get yourself in that trap. Do your homework, look at the products before you. How long did they take for review? As you can see from this graph, 510Ks are a little bit better than PMAs, but if you stick just to those guidelines, you're going to get yourself into trouble with management, because review times take longer than your expectation. So that's part of the homework that you need to do, and know how those products are being developed. And I mean, how those reviews are being developed through the agency. Next slide, Susumu. So basically, there is a lot of commonality as you go globally. And so you need to understand the basic common things between those regulations, but also the regional regulations, especially now with Brexit, what we're hearing for the UK, but what's done in other countries too, where you might want to release your product and be able to convey and communicate this within your organization so they have realistic expectations. But two things that we really see that are broad concepts and most applicable across global regions: design controls and risk management. And hopefully you start to understand how these things are intimately involved and how they overlap between these two areas. And all of these two concepts are applicable throughout the life cycle of your device. Design controls are never ending. You have consistent review and management of your design controls. You're always making sure that as your device evolves a little bit over its lifetime, and we'll talk a little bit later about post-market surveillance, but your design verification and your design validation is happening with the evolution of your product. And then as that transitions to design transfer, you're evolving your process V&V with that as well. And then risk management feeds back into design controls. From the initial development of your product, you're involved with planning, analysis, and evaluation of the risk of your product. And don't forget the importance of human factors. That has global emphasis. Everybody's looking at the application of human factors with our devices. And then ultimately, you're going to have to control that risk. And that goes forward to post-market surveillance with your device. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that's really important here with risk management is never forget Murphy's Law. It very much applies to medical devices. If anything can go wrong, it will. And so our jobs as regulatory professionals is to anticipate what can go wrong. That's a very hard sell to some engineers. They say, like to think our device is perfect. No, you should be thinking about not the perfectness of our device, but what could go wrong with our device. And I don't have time to get through all of these corollaries, but look at the second corollary in particular. It's impossible to make anything foolproof because fools are so ingenious. This is not, don't get me wrong, this is not to say our clients and our customers and our clinicians and end users are fools. They're not, but inevitably, a customer, if there's something that can potentially go wrong with your device, somebody's going to find it and bring it to your attention. So our job as regulatory professionals is to make sure we do our job and look at our devices from the point of view of risk management. Next slide. So next slide, what are we talking about? Risk management, failure modes, and effects analysis. We're assessing risk from both design and manufacturing, and I should add to that, to application as well. We're identifying and rating these risks and function, and then hazards, consequences, occurrence, and severity, rating these before and after you're mitigating risk. And it doesn't stop once our device is on the market or once our device is submitted to regulatory authorities. We're doing this throughout the life cycle of our device. We're identifying additional hazards that maybe we didn't think of, or maybe we underemphasize. We're estimating and evaluating those risks and figuring how to control this, and then monitoring the effectiveness of the controls. But one of the things that you have to keep in mind through all this too is to convey the importance of risk management to top management, because inspections now are top down, they're not bottom up. And if risk management, if there's a lot of risk with your device and a lot of problems with your device, regulatory agencies are going to come in and they're going to cite executive management first with why aren't you paying attention to these things? And they need to know their responsibilities in providing us with resources and qualified personnel to be able to manage risk with our devices. Next slide, please. So ultimately, we have an ongoing responsibility in ensuring our medical device quality and safety. This is equally applicable wherever we are in the world, whether it's applied to, for example, the EU MDR or the US CFR and QSR. We have a responsibility throughout the life cycle of our device for managing our risk and maintaining our design controls. And so we have to have active post-market surveillance and do that oftentimes through post-market studies. And then never de-emphasize the importance of CAPA, corrective actions and preventative actions, which you're going to take as these risks come forward to you. And roll these into your design changes and modifications to your approved or cleared devices, and be able to properly manage the potential risks that you might see with your device. So you have to have a reactive post-market surveillance, and this is reflected back to us through customer complaints. Obviously, we have to have a big complaint handling system, what I call unsolicited user feedback, things that are observational. I firmly encourage regulatory professionals to go to professional scientific medical meetings and sit in your company's booth and listen to customers that come in that have used our products, and listen to the things that they say, and maybe think, maybe we need to figure that to reflect this back to our risk management in our design review, and how we're going to look at these things, and what are the importance of these risks that we should look at, and how should we do our failure analysis, and there's your CAPA again, and tie this to our in-house testing. But then the other thing to not forget about in the current environment and the current technology is keep an eye on social media, and keep an eye on professional literature and what they're saying about your product in social media and literature reviews. So not just the technical things you're hearing all the time by word of mouth, but what are you seeing in social media and literature reviews, or even hearing from professional societies as people are looking at our devices and evaluating our devices, and kind of giving us feedback from areas that you might not think of as traditional areas where we get feedback for our devices. And this has a global application no matter where you're selling your device in the world. So that's a few thoughts on regulatory strategy. That's where, I guess next slide, that's where we're going to have to kind of wrap up our presentation at this point, to leave at least a few minutes for questions. And Paul, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Reading these slides that you and Susumu presented today, Peter, there's enough material here for a whole day seminar.
Absolutely.
There's enough material for a week seminar. But let's try and just tackle a couple of questions, I guess, while we've got a second. Just a few moments ago, before this presentation, Tim was giving us an update on Brexit and what's happening there. How do you stay on top of all that stuff? A couple of years ago, you'd have thought you'd have addressed the European requirements in one hit. Now you've got Swiss requirements, you've got UK requirements. How does people stay in touch with all the things that are changing? And any tips on that?
Well, regulatory intelligence is very important, and we all are tapped into feeds that we get from RAPs and news feeds from RAPs and other organizations, but there are also regulatory intelligence firms, and the one comes immediately to mind is Gray Matter, former RAP's president Melissa Walker, her company. But they're regulatory intelligence companies that you can contract with, that their job is to monitor all these things and feed back to you. And there are other companies too, but it is a lot to keep track of, definitely. So Susumu, I don't know if you have any other thoughts? Or?
Yeah, that is 80% of my job, every day. keep chasing all of the changes. If you have access to trade organization like a working group like AdvaMed, MedTech Europe, and others, I really encourage you to join the working group. They have a lot of discussion going on. You know, UK CA mark is one of the hot topic now. And then IVDR and MDR implementation, what is going on, what is not working, that kind of things. You can see, you can hear a lot of information from that. So we used to say how to get the information. Now we have too much information. How to pick important one for our business. That's really important and difficult things. So in order to do that, you need to know your product line, and also, as I said, product, for successful commercial launch, you need to know the market you are looking at, and if the market is changing, you need to follow the trend. So I have been spending probably 5 hours, 6 hours a day on the phone or web conference with trade organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge mountain of challenge. I don't know how the RA folks keep on top of everything. We've got about a minute and a half left, so very quickly, you mentioned, Peter, about regulatory timelines and setting expectations. In my previous role, I can't list the number of times companies would come to me in the last quarter of the year and say their bonuses were all linked to getting CE mark before the end of the year. How do you stop expectations being set that are not correct?
And that's tough because you look at executive management of the companies and they're gonna look at the straight timelines and that's their expectations. And so from my perspective, at least in my experience, when I was director and vice president of regulatory affairs for companies, it's to me it was all about education, and you have to sit these people down and say these are what you can expect. We're doing our best to streamline the process as much as possible, but you need to educate them, and the prudent CEO, the prudent company president is going to say, yeah, I get it. Then they don't want to get in trouble either. And so you have to say, look, we're streamlining this and we're doing the best we can and we're maintaining communication with the relative agencies, but this is the reality of how long this takes. Unfortunately, not all CEOs are prudent. And sometimes, they give expectations out to the market that, just are going to be very tough to meet, leading to disappointment. In any case, we're out of time. Thank you both for excellent presentations. I think that's very insightful. I think we could spend all day talking about this, but we've got to finish in time so that the quality management track can start on time.
Great.
Thanks,
great.
guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Be well.